Hi and welcome to lesson 2 of Learn to Play the Piano. So hopefully you've mastered Sweet Hour of Prayer and your C major scale in the right hand. Today in this lesson we're going to dive into the world of chords, and today we're going to learn all about the C major chord. The C major chord, as you can see, has the bottom note of C, then it goes up to E, and then it goes up to G. We play the C major scale, which you can see on the screen in front of you. You can see that the first note is C, then the third note is E, and the fifth note is G. So these are our notes of the C major chord. And when we look at a chord, we always look at the bottom note and we go upwards. So what we're going to do is we're going to try and identify C major chords in our piece that we learnt last week, which was Sweet Hour of Prayer. And we're going to do this together and I'll explain to you how this goes. Now there's one thing to remember. When we play a chord, if the C is on the bottom, like you can see here, then it's in root position. The C is on the bottom. But with a chord, we can have the notes in a different combination. So potentially a different note could be at the bottom. Now if you look at this image, you can see that the second chord has an E at the bottom, then we go up to a G, and then a C is on top. This is known as first inversion. So when the middle note of the chord is at the bottom, that's a first inversion. And if we look across at the third chord on our right, we can see that the bottom note is the G, and then above that is the C, and above that is the E. So when that top note is on the bottom of the chord, that's called a second inversion. So you can see our chord has three notes, C, E and G. When C is on the bottom, that's root position. If E is on the bottom, that's a first inversion. And if G is on the bottom, that's a second inversion. So let's have a look at the music. We can see the first chord on Sweet. Now, we look at the bottom note. So here, because we have a treble and a bass clef, the bottom note is going to be in the bass clef, and it's going to be that very bottom note. Have a look at that note and tell me, or think to yourself, what note it is. So that's a C, and above that, also in the bass clef, is an E, and then if we look up into the treble clef, we can see there's a C. So we can see the notes C and E in this first chord. So this is a C major chord. Just because one of the notes is missing, it doesn't matter too much. So put a big circle around this chord, or just put a highlighter through it. Now let's look at the next chord on the word hour. Again, we look at the bottom note, it's a C. We look at the note above that, it's a G. Then the note above that in the treble clef is a C, and the note above that is an E. So in this chord we see the notes C, E, and G, and our bottom note is C. So this means it's a C major chord that has all the three notes of a C major chord, and because the C is on the bottom, it's in root position. Now let's have a look at the next one, the word of. We can see at the bottom that there's a C and a G, but then in the treble clef there's a D and an F. So these are not notes of the C major chord. So we will not circle this chord. We'll move on. Let's go to prayer. So the bottom note is a C. The note above that is a C. Then in the treble clef we have an E, and then we have a G. So we have our notes C, E and G, and the bottom note is a C. So that means it's in root position. So hopefully you're starting to get the hang of this. Let's go to the next chord on Sweet. And it's exactly the same as the chord before, so we can confidently circle or highlight that chord knowing that it's a C major chord in root position. Now let's go to the second bar. On the word hour, the bottom note there is an F, and above that is a C, then we have another F and an A. So these notes do not belong to the C major chord, so we won't mark it. And we go to the word of, And again, we see an F and a C, a G and a B. Most of these notes do not belong to our C major chord, so we'll ignore it. And then the same goes with prayer. That's another chord that doesn't belong to C major. And then the last chord in that bar, again, if we have a look, there's an F, a C, an F and an A. It doesn't belong to C major, so we won't circle that. But let's go to the third bar and have a look at that bottom note. On calls, we have C, C, and then the treble clef E and G. So there we are, we're back to another C major chord. So circle that, and again, the bottom note is a C, so it's in root position. On the word me, we have a C on the bottom, a G, and then we have a C and an E. So you can circle or highlight that chord. It's a C major chord in root position. Then we have from. Again, we can see it's the same as me, so we know that first sequence of notes is a C major chord. And then where it has from, the second part of that, we have an F, a B, and a D. None of those notes belong to C major, so we won't circle them. And then the last chord of that bar has a C, an E, and a C. So we can circle that one, knowing it's a C major chord in root position. And then the final bar of this first line, on the word world, there's a G on the bottom, a G above that, then there's a B and a D. So this is not a C major chord. But let's look at the next chord. Again, there's two G's on the bottom, a C and an E. So these notes all belong to the C major chord. So it's a C major chord, but it's not in root position because the bottom note is a G. Now if you think back to the table where we had the root position, first inversion and second inversion, it's got to be one of the inversions. And it's the second inversion because the G is on the bottom. And then finally we go to care, and we can see that has two G's, a B and a D, so it does not belong to C major. We've identified the C major chord together, so your homework for this week is to go through the rest of the piece of music and identify the remaining C major chords. If you have any problems, talk to someone you know who has some musical knowledge, or just send me a quick comment below and hopefully I can give you a helping hand. And to finish off our homework assignment for this week, you'll be doing a C major scale 1 octave with your left hand. So remembering our fingering, we count our fingers from the thumb, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We play our C major scale starting on C below, an octave below middle C. And we go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3. And then we go back 2, 3, slide the thumb underneath, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I'll demonstrate this for you on the piano. So the C major scale with the left hand, here's middle C. We will start 1 octave below middle C, and it'll sound like this. So the hymn for this week, if you have your Living Hymns hymn book, is hymn 155. It's at Calvary and it's in C major. If you don't have the hymn book, then I'll link it below in the description. So again, we'll have the same format approach. So in your right hand, you'll play the melody and the alto with your right hand together. So it'll sound like this. Okay, and your left hand will be the single note and you'll be playing the bass note. So that's the very bottom note. So it'll sound like this. So hands together, your hymn is going to sound something like this.